Welcome to Daily World TV. I'm Ajit Chak. I'm your host for the day, and sitting with us here is Korff, who's our expert for the day. As you know, the Chinese are embarking on a very ambitious space program, and so is India, because ISRO has been in the news recently for many things. Now the question is, can we compete with the Chinese in space? What are the issues for India? What are the issues for China? Obviously, China will be there more for military reasons rather than just reasons for peace and development and agriculture. While our focus is more on agriculture, weather prediction, management of railways or whatever satellites required for running computers or internet systems or whatever. So. Is there any clash with China? Is there any competition with China? Are we way behind China? I mean, what's your assessment on this?
Well, this will take a couple minutes to break down, but it's both a blessing and a curse. The reality is there's only a handful of serious space players. There's the United States, there's Russia, they're the two biggies, they've been there the longest. You've got the European Union. When they launch something, it's usually a group of nations or in cooperation with the US. Now you've got India, which has rewritten the space books for the better. For example, you're the only country that sent a probe to Mars and got it right the first time. Never happened before. And then you had a record-breaking launch of microsatellites, nanosatellites. That was never done before. But what's happening is China is the only country to have a sweeping top-to-bottom vision of permanent presence in space. And like you said, because you can't separate the military from the rest of the country, that is a blessing and a curse. It's a curse if you want peace. It's a blessing if you're a military guy in China. So here's the challenge. In the United States, privatization is starting to eat up key chunks of the space market. You've got Boeing, you've got SpaceX, and you have Amazon.com's owner, Jeff Bezos, who, by the way, is the second richest man in the world now. He's about to pass Bill Gates if things continue. He and Elon Musk, another billionaire, they've got these reusable rockets. That's a game changer because India, for example, has to build a whole new rocket and then they lose it when they launch. But these guys can bring it down and reuse it again, and eventually we'll be able to turn that same rocket around to be launched again the very next day or 2 days later. It saves a lot of money. That can more than compensate for the cheap labor factor in India. So these guys are interested in putting people in space. Musk, by 2018, is going to have people going into space for a week to the moon and around in orbit and coming back. Then you have the service of launching cheap satellites. Nanosatellites are the future. They're limited function, tiny satellites that are relatively cheap to build. You can cram a lot of them in there. They don't weigh a lot. They run on solar energy.
Yeah.
So India is going to be probably the leader in launching many of these per payload, okay? The problem India has is that its vision is fundamentally different from China's, and China's is all sweeping, courtesy of something like Star Trek. Let me explain real quickly. China is not only they are in the process of rolling out a permanent presence in space program. They're actually building now huge cities whose function will service their space program. And like NASA's spin-off programs, they will take the technologies that are learned to support the space program and convert it to manufacturing for commercial purposes. So basically, if some new breakthrough is made in nanotechnology for the space program, the Communist Chinese will then turn around to you as an American company and say, hey, we can sell this to you as well, cheaper than anybody, build it cheaper, and you as an American company will pay the Chinese to do that, and that money becomes an entire ecosystem that fuels itself. So it's like the way Dubai had overhauled and had reclaimed land and made shipping ports, and now they have a very good economy, got into financial services, providing a whole widget. China's now doing that, and India doesn't have a city or cities planned that are dedicated to make an ecosystem of its space program. That's the missing ingredient that China has figured out that no one else has. The irony is that India could do this. If they were to think long term, they could do exactly what China does, And because they've already are ahead of China in what they've done so far, they could stay ahead and force the Chinese to always play catch up. So it's ironic that India is the only thing that can stop China. But like what seems to be a lot in this country, if they just don't bother, it's never going to happen. Whereas NASA and the European Union and the Russians, they're not even thinking of that. They're happy to be privatized because the government can shrink their budget and they can just outsource it, to private companies. So ironically, India is the best hope to stop China. And it's in India's best interest to stop China because, as you said, China wants to weaponize space. So while India's focused on, global climate change weather satellites, China's interested in lasers and weapons that can blind all satellites, including India's. So the moment India just adds this one element that China's already starting on to make a whole city dependent on the space program around their space program that's already doing wonderful things, they can stop China or make sure it never becomes the dominant player. But until India bothers, the Chinese have already won before they even set foot on the moon with a rover next year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Captain. Thanks.
Thank you.